So what's been the response, Lindy, since you made your announcement?
Vitriolic. And they say they're not a cult, but look at how they behave when one of their own dares to think for herself. The excommunication, the defamation, the public shaming, the boycott campaigns, the psychological terrorism. I no longer have comments on any of my social media because it's just too much. I don't need that. It's just endless. And as soon as you step out of line, they will get you.
Former Democratic fundraiser Lindy Li hasn't been making any friends lately as she's been going around on more right-leaning conservative media discussing basically the horrors of being a Democrat these days and discussing their tailspin that they're currently in. I don't know whether to take her seriously or maybe she's just taking advantage of what she sees as a good opportunity. I don't know. She really goes into a lot of detail in this video and kind of bears her soul a bit more. Let me know what you think.
Joining me now is former DNC fundraiser Lindy Li. Lindy, thanks for being here. You announced your exit from the Democrat Party after coming under attack for criticizing Vice President Harris and her campaign. You say you were basically ostracized. How so?
Ashley, Merry Christmas. It's wonderful to be with you.
Merry Christmas.
This has been a long time coming. My initial disillusionment became clear when I realized that essentially set $2.5 billion on fire. They raised $1.5 billion through the campaign, another billion through the super PAC Future Forward. And there's been no accountability. We still haven't gotten any answers as to why Oprah, a billion.
Wow. So we've been hearing 2 or 1.5 billion all this time, but now we're hearing, I'm not sure if it's, she was a fundraiser, so she would probably know better than most of us, that they literally burned through $2.5 billion. I'm still having a little trouble believing that because it was only 3 months. The campaign was 3 months. And I'm not even sure, maybe that also ties in with Joe Biden when he was running. Maybe it's not just in 12 weeks. However you slice it, $2.5 billion or even the $1.5 billion that we heard more consistently over that they ran through in 3 months is insane. I really can't wait until those numbers are out to see exactly what they spent their money on, where they spent their money. That's totally nuts. But given that, I can see where she would be upset because her being a fundraiser in some way, her name, her reputation was kind of on the line because she was going around contacting people trying to get these millionaires and probably billionaires as well to donate tremendously to help the Democratic Party. And they spent a good portion of it on foolish, silly stuff, celebrities, giving Beyonce, rumor has it, $10 million for 15 minutes or so. Meg Thee Stallion got, I believe it was like $5 million, and Oprah $2.5 million. Al Sharpton somewhere in the neighborhood of $250,000. I mean, they were just throwing away money left and right in hopes that they could ultimately buy an election. But as we see, that failed pretty miserably nationwide.
Billionaire got $2.5 million through her production company. Why couldn't she pay for it? She's an oligarch. She could have just paid for the production costs herself.
Right.
And not to mention the fact that they spent $450,000 putting Kamala Harris's face on the sphere. Now tell me why that would be helpful. Tell me how that would help her win. Obviously.
Yeah, because you think about it. Yeah, people come and go. People travel from all over the country, all over the world to Las Vegas. But $500,000 to put her face on. But if you're familiar with the Sphere in Las Vegas, yeah, you can see it from different locations around the city. But it's still pretty obscure. It's still pretty hidden. Obviously, we can say that in hindsight now, but that was a total waste of money. And again, the difference is, I'm sure that the Republicans spent a lot of money on, or they spent some money on celebrities and paying speakers and things like that. But there was just a different movement, a different feel on the Republican side. Basically, the entire ticket was a bunch of former Democrats, or at least many, and at least some that just did not like Donald Trump. But over the last 4 to 8 years, they had a complete shift in mentality and in thinking. But I think that was largely because the left has just lost their minds. That's the only way to put it. They've lost their minds with those radical policies, and they were basically gaslighting people who didn't agree with them. But ultimately you had people who were just passionate about what was going on in our country and were willing to do whatever it took to be a part of change or to see change. So you had a lot of celebrities, a lot of well-known people who could garner a pretty big paycheck, who were just passionate, just wanted to be a part of that movement, as opposed to Oprah taking $2.5 million. If she really cared, and it makes you just wonder how sincere she was when she got up there and she spoke, and Beyonce and J-Lo, all these other folks. Were they really sincere about stopping Donald Trump, or were they just doing it because they were actors, half of them, and they were getting paid? You really have to wonder.
That was utter failure. And then they spent $500,000 essentially bribing Al Sharpton moments before he interviewed her. And this is our hard-earned money. This is the money that I worked so hard to raise. I raised millions of this, and donors are feeling burned. And let me tell you, although I might be the only one coming forward, I haven't met a single donor who disagrees with me.
So what's been the response, Lindy, since you made your announcement?
Vitriolic. And they say they're not a cult, but look at how they behave when one of their own dares to think for herself. The excommunication.
Tell me about it. When I first came out and let people know that I was no longer a Democrat, I started speaking more and more about the evils of the Democratic Party. Man, folks were coming after me left and right. Friends stopped talking to me. Family members stopped talking to me over time. And I'm sure there's some of that on both sides of the political aisle, but I have never seen the levels of insanity and hatred and vilification that takes place when you don't agree with somebody on the left. They'll come after you. They'll ruin your career. They'll come after you physically. All you have to do is look around. I mean, there were so many videos being posted when people wore MAGA shirts or MAGA hats, people acting violently against them. There's a whole different level. Just look at Antifa, BLM, go back to 2020, all the violence that took place around the country. You didn't see a bunch of Republicans up there burning down cities. Yeah, of course, I know some people reference January 6th. Let me tell you this. I mean, we're already hearing now that there were FBI informants in the crowd. And if you even remotely believe that the FBI isn't above stoking the flames in order to get their way or to arrest someone, all you have to do is go back and look at the whole case against the governor of Michigan, how the FBI came in there with a group of militia guys, I believe it was, and basically instigated the violence in an attempt to set them up so that it would look as if they were trying to kidnap the governor of Michigan. And just throughout history, there have been other opportunities. There have been other times where the FBI, some of these federal agencies, clearly demonstrated or were clearly seeking to entrap somebody. I'll be willing to put cash on it that as time goes on over the next 4 years, if Kash Patel gets in there, we're going to find out a whole lot more dirt on the FBI. When it came down to Donald Trump's administration, the last 4 years, and God only knows what else is going to come up in history in general. But in my mind, the political left is nothing but a cult. And I'm not saying that every member, every person who's a Democrat is one, but the further left you go, the more extreme you get. And sadly, the Democratic Party was completely taken over in like the last 10 years. They've been almost completely taken over by the more extreme branches.
The defamation, the public shaming, the boycott campaigns, the psychological terrorism. I no longer have comments on any of my social media because it's just too much. I don't need that. It's just endless. And as soon as you step out of line, they will get you.
Yeah, that is clear. So what's next? Are you going to turn Republican, independent? What's next for you?
This all has been so fast for me, and actually someone scooped my own exit. Some random person on Twitter got 3 million views saying that Lindy Li is going to exit. I couldn't even own my own departure. So this is all happening really quickly for me, but you might see me at the inauguration. I don't want to say too much right now, but somebody on Team Trump already reached out to me. They've been incredibly gracious. And on day one, they were kinder to me and more humane than the DNC ever was.
Wow.
You know, and where I struggle in this whole thing is how her shift was so quick. At the same time, I didn't experience the things that she's experienced. So I don't want to be too hard on her, because it sounds like as soon as she got out there and started speaking out and being open about how ridiculous things were, all the money that was wasted, I think that's what got the ball going. Was she was just angry about all the money that was thrown away in this failed campaign. Now, candidates lose and win and lose all the time, and it's pretty much up in the air. But when you raise so much money, you waste so much money. And she was upset because I think she felt as if, as I said earlier, part of her reputation was on the line. But the biggest issue that she had, and I'm sure this is from the left's perspective, was her going on Fox News multiple times and sharing her thoughts, sharing her opinions. They felt as if that was the ultimate betrayal, and these people pounced on her. And I think as I think through this, as I'm speaking with y'all, I'm thinking that she quite possibly just saw the attacks and reality was starting to set in. Because maybe she was just caught up in the bubble, just caught up in the fundraising and trying to support what she thought was right. If I was doing the interview, I would be like, what caused you? What truly went into your shift in thinking over the last few weeks? Because it hasn't been that long since November 5th. Now you're talking about leaving the party as a whole. What led to that? I would love to dig deeper on that question. Maybe he'll ask that as this video proceeds.
Wow.
And I just think that speaks volumes. Yeah.
I think you're right. I want you to comment on this one, Lindy. I want you to listen to what Bill Maher had to say, talking about the Democrats. Listen to this.
Remember him hugging Nixon, and then
so what?
I know, but at the time he was he was seen as a traitor.
It's so funny you mention that, because like today we live in this time when you're not allowed to have friends from the other side or cross lines politically. And I forgot that there's an example of that way back when.
Yeah.
A guy who crossed lines politically. Ooh, the worst thing you could ever do, be friends with a Republican? Call 911.
You know, the irony is, Lindy, that Democrats will always call Donald Trump a threat to democracy, and yet there is no democracy within their world. You either believe what they say or you are excommunicado. You are no longer worthy of any conversation.
That's an excellent point in and of itself. Now, I know for a fact that I've lost friends over my rightward shift over the last few years. I'm aware of that. I had plenty of people that were friends that I worked with who stopped talking to me, or I should say who I considered friends, because my real friends, they're still there. They may not agree with me. They may even hate some of the things I talk about. But I know if my back was against the wall, and they've demonstrated that to me even in recent times, even in recent months, that I know that if I was in need, that they would be there and trying to do whatever they could to support me. But on the other side, I would say, but as a whole, there were many people who I considered friends. They just stopped flat out talking to me. And I'm not saying that in a woe is me fashion. Heck, I mean, if that's what you want to do, that's how you want to roll, especially if we really weren't that cool from the get-go. It is what it is. I can't control the way you feel and the way you think. But what gets me is ironic in this whole thing, if I'm using that word properly, is how many of these folks are the main ones that preach tolerance and respect and respecting differences and love, free love type of thing. But yet it's all good. That all sounds good if it goes along with what they believe. It just demonstrates the hypocrisy of it all.
Ashley, you're so right. And now I'm in exile and I'm happier for it. And you know what? This is meant to happen. And I've had friends just in the last couple of days, so-called friends, block me. And just simply because I expressed a view that wasn't the doctrine, that wasn't officially sanctioned. This is kind of authoritarian. And I grew up in an authoritarian regime. This reeks of that. This is an American democracy. What happened to the First Amendment?
Yeah, and that's one more thing I want to talk about. I heard her say in a different interview that she's a immigrant from China. Her parents were raised in the communist regime. So for her to come here to the United States and then end up being a Democrat, which largely mirrors a lot of that anti-speech, gun control, hatred towards religious freedoms, that's more communistic, socialistic, Marxist, and tyrannical than anything that Donald Trump has portrayed. But yet they love putting that label on people on the right. But for her to grow up and have her family raised and live in that environment, I found it really odd that she ended up attaching to the Democratic Party. Really weird. I'm hoping to read and listen to more of her conversations and discussions, but I'm pretty intrigued by this whole story.
Right, exactly. Well, it only exists if you agree with the doctrine. Yeah, go ahead.
You're so on point. Sorry, one last thing. I've been a conservative all my life. I've been saying that, and they're just not listening to me. All of a sudden, they're saying that I shifted. No, I grew up as a Christian conservative. This is just who I've been. And so they want to demonize anybody who's who has the courage to speak for herself.
I know she did a recent interview with Piers Morgan. She was on there in a panel discussion. So I got to go back and listen to her. I just wonder if she just got caught up in the Never Trump movement, or the Trump's a racist, he's Hitler. Did she just get caught up in that? Because as a Christian conservative, she grew up as a Christian conservative. So I'm wondering, is she currently a Christian, or was that just her background? I'm really intrigued. Let me know what y'all think about the video. Give me a comment down below. And if you appreciate content like this, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, and I'll see you on the next video.